Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Isaac from Guns for Everyone. First things first, let's say a prayer to Santo Edgar. Santo Edgar, please help this video to not suck. There we go. That's a good sign. Lit it on the first try. All right, it's been a minute since I posted anything. I did post a podcast with Edgar the other day, but it's been like over a month since I did a video, and I'm not going to waste your time or mine explaining why. Before I erase this, just want to call attention. This is National Suicide Prevention Month, September. Walk the Talk America, WTTA.org, is a pro-gun organization that is also pro-responsible mental health. And I encourage you guys to go check that out. I'll put a link in the description. Very important topic in the world of gun ownership, suicide prevention, and reducing the negative outcomes with firearms. All right, but let me go ahead and get rid of that. Oh, I got to get rid of this. It's in the way. All right, today's topic is going to be talking to the police after a dynamic, critical incident, especially one in which you have used or threatened to use violence. Now, lately I've been trying to break up videos into short versions and long versions, and I don't know what's going to happen with this video. This video might become a long version, then I'll do a short version, but we'll see. Talking to the cops. All right. If you ask a lawyer what you should do, you're going to get the typical don't talk to the police. And if you ask a law enforcement officer what to do, they're going to tell you that's probably not very realistic. And both of them are, let's give both of them the benefit of the doubt. They're trying to help you navigate this situation, this post-incident aftermath, with the least amount of negative outcomes possible for you, legally speaking. There's all kinds of problems with asking either one of these two people, mostly based on their experience and their values, as well as where they view risk and benefit. But that's essentially how we should look at the problem. We should look at it as a risk and benefit problem. So the way we talk about safety, and in this case, it's your legal safety or the safety of your future, we have a balance of risk and benefit, and we're trying to maximize benefit and manage the risks around this. So the expected benefit, that's always the thing with the benefit. We can't predict the outcome. We're going with what the expected benefit is, and we're balancing the known or the perceived risks. So the known risks, when we're talking to the cops, like the big picture risks, is that we would have jail, some version of incarceration, and that could go from a night in the holding cell all the way to life in prison, based on this conversation here. Not saying it will, just saying that this is the beginning of that risk, is when we start talking to the cops that the downstream eventual big picture risk is incarceration. There's a lot of other things that come along with that, because a lot of people are like, yeah, I understand that's true, but if I did the right thing, I'm not going to go to prison. You don't know that. You don't know that. That is a risk, and there are people who believed they were doing the right thing, and genuinely, if you talk to them, still believe they did the right thing and ended up in prison for it, okay? There's a significant financial risk that starts with this conversation, and that could include your job. If you have a job where a felony charge is not going to work with your employer, this conversation could lead to you losing your job. This conversation can also lead to eventual civil liability, because it will be part of the evidence in the civil litigation if it comes to that. Okay. Perceived risks, I would say perceived risks more fall into the realm of not really knowing what you're doing in this conversation. Perceived risk could be something like that the DA is out to get you in a self-defense shooting, so protect yourself at all costs. That might not be true. A lot of times it's not really true. There's a perceived risk that if you defend yourself, the entire system is going to come after you. And that isn't necessarily true either. And if we look at self-defense law closely, we understand that the burden of proof, generally speaking, is on the state to disprove your claim of self-defense. So that immediately starts to stack the system itself into your favor. It doesn't mean it's going to work out to your benefit. I'm just saying this idea that the system is constantly working against you is not really necessarily true. It depends on a lot of factors that are usually outside of your control and definitely outside your experience. Or I should flip that around. Definitely outside your control and usually outside of your lived experience around that stuff. So, but we're trying to manage this risk. So, our benefit or the reason why we're in this situation was we tried to defend our lives, and now we're trying to legally defend what we did afterwards. And then we've identified our risks. And then how do we manage our risks? That's the concept of safety. Third, managing risk. Well, the best way to manage the risk, in my view on this, in my opinion on this, is to, let's say, manage risk is first and foremost is have a plan, a realistic plan. Now, that key word is realistic because, you to some degree, you don't really know what you're planning for. You don't know what the condition is going to be under which you have to defend yourself. You don't know who's going to be present, who's not going to be present. There are people around you, friends and family, who could complicate your situation quite a bit in this right here if they can't keep their mouth shut or if they don't know that they should keep their mouth shut. A realistic plan needs to be realistic we use the plausibility principle, most probable, then plausible, not necessarily everything that's possible. So a probable, realistic plan is that you should have the ability and the means to hire an attorney as quickly as possible. When we talk about hiring attorneys, what we're trying to do is get let's say, an experienced and capable person on your side as quickly as possible. As quickly as possible. Well, I'm talking to the cops. How could I have an attorney at this initial conversation with the cops? Well, if you have one of those legal plans, firearms legal protection, CCW safe, attorneys on retainer, USCCA, right to bear. Some of these organizations have an attorney number. Like when you call the hotline number, you're speaking to an attorney. And some of them you'll speak to a customer service rep who will then connect you to an attorney. The sooner you get one involved, the better. There could be plenty of cases where talking to customer service first and then talking to an attorney will work just fine. But I prefer that if I could have it, I would prefer that I have an attorney answer the phone when I call the number. Because that attorney can help you in this conversation in the most experienced way possible. Attorneys are expensive, but that's why, again, I recommend that you have one of these programs so that when you call that phone number that, that attorney is not going to cost you any money. However, even if you do have to pay for an attorney, just having an attorney on speed dial means that at least that initial conversation, you're going to protect yourself to the best of your ability. If you do have to pay for an attorney, it's not uncommon that attorney, depending on what happened in this scenario, is going to cost you 10 grand by the end of the next day, and maybe more than that by the end of the case. So understand that part of that plan is, could I pay for that if I had to? Could I, even if you had to do it on credit, even if you had to fork over a credit card that has more than $10,000 on the limit, what are you trading for that $10,000? Well, you could be trading your ability to earn money going forward. That $10,000 is going to hurt, but it's going to hurt a lot less than a felony arrest and a felony charge that could prevent your ability to do work. It's going to hopefully head off some of that civil risk as well by calling this attorney $10,000 up front, helping to ward off $200,000 legal fee later. definitely makes a difference. Also, the earlier you call an attorney, the quicker they can do their own damage control around the incident, the less likely you're going to need that attorney for a protracted amount of time, a long amount of time. All right, so there's so many reasons to call an attorney that it's hard to summarize them. But I would encourage you to learn more about how attorneys work, especially in the early stages. And Attorneys on Retainer has an excellent video series called Fighting the State, where they're laying out what the attorney does in order of when they do it at the beginning of a criminal case. And the more you start to understand the value, the more you understand why it's so important to call one as soon as possible. And the more you understand why it's valuable to have them paid for and vetted ahead of time so you don't have to make that difficult decision in the moment. Your plan should also be how you're going to communicate. And the realistic part of communication is understanding that the stress of this situation is going to severely or likely to severely affect your ability to communicate. So your communication should be as brief as you can to communicate the things which you must communicate to them. The risk here is that the longer you talk, the more likely it is you're going to say something that's going to negatively affect your outcome. The more words you use, the more likely it is that you are going to hurt your case. The longer you talk, the longer the conversation goes before you involve an attorney, the more likely you are to negatively affect your case. And when we say negatively affect your case, this is what we're talking about. This is not theoretical. This is real. This is what happens. The longer a case goes on, this stuff definitely hurts you in the long run. Okay? So, how are we going to communicate? Rehearse in your head how you are going to tell the police that you are going to cooperate with them, that you are a victim of a crime, and that you need to talk to an attorney. Rehearse that in a realistic way. One of the ways that I like to mentally run through that in my head is watching videos of people actually doing it. And you can go on video and you can watch badge cams of victims talking to police officers. You can watch badge cams or listen to 911 calls where somebody has defended themselves, and try to put yourself in that person's shoes. Not like what they should have done, but put yourself in their traumatized shoes. Put yourself in the position of like, wow, this would actually be a really hard conversation. And visualize a face-to-face conversation where you are communicating that you are the victim of violence, that you are going to talk to an attorney, and that you are going to cooperate, and that you have nothing else to say until you talk to an attorney. But also part of that is learning what these other two perspectives are, the attorney's perspective and the law enforcement perspective. Going back to Attorneys on Retainer, Mark Victor had Massad Ayoob on his podcast recently. Maybe not recently. I listened to it recently. It might be an old episode. But if you look up Mark Victor, Massad Ayoob, or Attorneys on Retainer, Massad Ayoob, you're going to get an hour-long conversation of these two differing opinions. Very respectful conversation, very reasoned conversation, very experienced conversation. But you're going to get a really detailed explanation from both of these guys on their perspective of why you should or should not talk to the cops, or how you should or should not talk to the cops. And that can help you better understand this piece of visualizing what that communication actually looks like. But if there's one single thing that tends to have the greatest effect on the legal outcome of your case, it is how quickly you get that competent legal advice, whether it's at the scene or in the hours afterwards. The longer it takes, the more likely you are to suffer these, I'm pointing without looking, these negative outcomes from your case. So, balance of risk and benefit. Benefit of defending yourself is being around to fight this. The benefit of communication is to be able to lay out your side of the story. The risks are, if you do this wrong, you're going to jail, at least for the night. You could be risking a lot of money, your ability to stay employed, the long-term civil outcomes. managing that risk, have a realistic plan. That plan should include an attorney, and that plan should should include learning how to effectively communicate in this high stress, high stakes conversation. All right, I think that's all I'm going to talk about on this for now. Leave some comments. I would love to hear your side of this, your opinions. Please make them reasoned opinions. Don't just spout off at the mouth. It's wasting your time and my time. But I would love to hear what your perspective on this is. Maybe your experience around this stuff. Appreciate you guys watching. Gunsforeveryone.com, free concealed carry classes, free handgun training. Look forward to seeing you guys in the future. Peace.